I wasn't supposed to be there. Just dropping off my mom's favorite flowers on her birthday, an early morning surprise. But as I turned the corner to her street, my heart stopped. My husband's car parked right outside her gate. At first, I thought something was wrong. Then I heard laughter. The front door was slightly open. I crept closer. And that's when I heard it. She has no idea we're still doing this. My knees went weak. My husband, my mother. Together, you won't believe what I heard next. And what I did after. Growing up, I used to think my mother was magic. The way her hands moved, kneading dough, braiding my hair, folding laundry with a kind of practice grace it. All felt like a dance, only she knew. When I was little, I clung to her warmth like a child clings to sunlight. Not knowing it's the very thing that makes everything grow, but warmth, I learned, can vanish slowly. Like how summer becomes fall without you noticing until the mornings. My mother changed after my father left. Or maybe she always had a sharpness I didn't see until the silence gave it space to echo. Either way, something hardened in her eyes. It wasn't that she stopped loving me. I don't think she ever truly did, but whatever love she had came with conditions. I learned to perform, be helpful, be quiet, be easy to love. She remarried a year later. A man with a temper and a voice that filled a room before he did. I stayed small. In the corners, in my room, in my own head. I remember once when I was 9, my stepfather smashed a plate because I spilled juice. My mother didn't even look at me, just swept the shards and muttered about clumsy hands. That night, I fell asleep curled against the wall and I told myself, one day I'll leave. And I'll never need her again. I left the day I turned 18. College was my freedom, my rebirth. I didn't look back, not when I moved into my first shoebox apartment, not when I scraped by on part-time jobs, not even when I went weeks without hearing her voice. I told myself it was better that way, cleaner, safer. And then I met James. He wasn't loud like the men I'd known. He didn't puff his chest or make me feel like I was standing on a trapdoor waiting to fall through. He listened. He made tea. When I cried without asking why, he remembered tiny things, like how I hate onions and how thunderstorms used to scare me. He never once made me feel like I was too much or not enough. Just enough. We got married on a rainy afternoon in a courthouse. With 2 witnesses we barely knew. My mother didn't come. She sent a 2-line email that said she was busy that week. I deleted it without replying. Still, over the years, James tried to mend that broken bridge between us. He said, maybe she doesn't know how to love in the way you needed. But she tried, right? And sometimes I almost believed him. Sometimes when my mother would call out of the blue and ask about our life, I'd think, maybe she's changing. Maybe we're both older now, softer. She came over once last year, unannounced. I opened the door and saw her standing there with a homemade pie and that same unreadable expression she always wore, part maternal pride, part judgment. James welcomed her in like she was family, like she hadn't vanished for years. He always knew what to say to her, the right amount of charm, humor, and deference. I remember watching them talk across the dinner table, how easily they laughed, how he filled the gaps where I struggled. I thought it was sweet. I thought it was him trying, but lately, something had changed between me and James. There were longer silences at breakfast, fewer late-night talks. His phone was always face down. I'd wake up and he'd already be gone, saying he had early meetings, but the shower would be cold, like it hadn't been used at all. I asked him once, "Is everything okay?" And he smiled too quickly. "Of course, just work stress, babe." But my gut didn't believe him. I started second-guessing myself, which scared me more than anything. Was I being paranoid? Was the damage from my past creeping into my marriage like a rot I couldn't see? Then there was the way he talked about my mother. "She's just misunderstood," he said one night. "She's sharp, but I think that's her defense." It was almost word for word what I'd told him once years ago. I remember freezing in that moment because it didn't sound like he was defending her for me. It sounded like he was defending her to me. Still, I shook it off. Maybe he just wanted us to be closer. Maybe I was reading too much into things. But that feeling cold and sharp sat in the back of my throat for weeks. It tasted like fear, like a storm I couldn't name. Like I was standing in front of something that hadn't broken yet, but was about to. I didn't know the truth then, but I was about to find out. It hit me while brushing my teeth. My mom's birthday, I froze mid-motion. Toothbrush dangling from my mouth. A drop of foam sliding down my chin. The calendar on my phone glowed in my hand March 3rd. How had I forgotten? The guilt landed hard in my stomach. She always made a scene about birthdays, even when we weren't close. A daughter who forgets her mother's birthday, she used to say, is a daughter raised without shame. Spat, rinsed, and hurried to throw on clothes. Jeans, sweater, no makeup. Time. I glanced at the clock, 6:57 a.m. Maybe if I got there early enough with her favorite lilies and a decent apology, would smooth things over before the guilt took root. I stopped by a corner shop on the way. The florist was still setting up, the glass cases foggy with cold air. I grabbed a bunch of white lily, her favorite tanned, paid in small bills with shaking fingers. My mind was racing through possible explanations. I was planning something for later. I wanted it to be a surprise. All of them. But better than admitting, I simply forgot. The drive to her house was quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you uneasy. The sky was that early, gray, heavy with cloud, damp with mist. I didn't bother turning on music. My thoughts were too loud anyway. The closer I got, the more anxious I felt. I hadn't seen her in weeks, maybe more. The last time we talked, it was over text. She'd asked if James and I were still boring as ever. I didn't reply. I couldn't tell if it was a joke or a jab. Her house came into view as I turned the corner. It sat behind tall iron gates with a red brick path curling toward the door. The garden was overgrown again. The roses she used to prune religiously had grown wild. Like even they'd stopped caring. That's when I saw it. James's car parked right in front of the gate. His unmistakable silver sedan with that tiny scratch on the rear bumper from when he backed into a shopping cart last year. My brain struggled to process it. He'd told me he was going in early for a client pitch. Said he wouldn't be home for dinner. Had kissed me on the forehead, barely awake, and left before the sun rose. So why was he here? At my mother's house, I slowed the car, pulse climbing into my throat. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe he'd stopped by for what? A surprise visit? Work advice? Something about real estate? He knew she used to be an interior designer. Maybe no, it didn't fit. He'd never visited her. Not alone. Not without telling me. I parked down the street far enough to not be seen, and sat there gripping the steering wheel, willing myself to breathe. Every nerve in my body screamed that something was wrong. The flowers lay beside me on the passenger seat like they belonged to someone else's day. I got out quietly and walked up the sidewalk, heart slamming against my ribs. I didn't know what I was doing. Wasn't trying to catch him in anything. I just needed to understand. The gate was slightly ajar. That alone felt wrong. My mother never left it open. She once scolded a mailman for not closing it properly. I pushed it just enough to slip through, careful not to let it creak. I moved along the edge of the house, staying behind the line of hedges. Her living room windows were slightly cracked just enough to hear muffled voices. His voice clear, warm, familiar in a way that suddenly felt unfamiliar. I told you, she doesn't suspect a thing. A pause, then laughter hers. She never was very bright about these things, my mother said. Just like when she was a kid, always trusting the wrong people. My knees bent involuntarily as I crouched beside the window, breath caught in my throat. I pressed closer. My mind was screaming, no, this can't be real, but my body was frozen in place. James again, softer now. You're sure you want to keep this up? I think we've pushed it far enough. And her answer, like ice. Down my spine, she's still useful, and honestly, it's fun. Having something that belongs to her. I didn't understand all of it, but I understood enough. They weren't just talking behind my back, they were together. Emotion surged, rage, betrayal, shame. I wanted to burst through that door, throw the lilies in her smug face, scream at them until my lungs gave out. But instead, I just stood there. I looked at the bouquet in my hand, white lilies, the flower of sympathy. Of funerals. I let them fall to the ground, petal tips brushing against the dirt. The rain had started again, soft at first, like the sky itself was hesitating to cry. I backed away from the window, one step, then another. My legs moved on their own. My breath was shallow, my skin clammy. My mother's laughter echoed in my ears long after I'd made it back to the car. I didn't drive off right away. I sat there watching the gate, heart pounding so loud it hurt. And all I could think was, how long? How long had they been doing this? And worse, what was I going to do now? I didn't want to keep listening. Some part of me begged to run, just turn around, disappear, pretend I'd imagined it. But I stayed there, crouched beneath the open window, frozen like prey that already knows it's been caught. The rain picked up, dampening my sleeves and soaking through my shoes, but I couldn't feel any of it. My whole body had narrowed too. The sound of their voices, James sighed, low and intimate. She's starting to notice, I can tell. The way she looks at me lately, it's like she knows something's off, but she's afraid to ask. My mother gave a small, bitter laugh. Of course, she's afraid. It's always been afraid. That's why it's so easy to lie to her. Easy? That word cut like a blade. James didn't respond right away. I could hear the clink of ceramic. Maybe he was drinking tea from the mugs I'd gifted her last Christmas, a set with little sunflowers on them because they reminded me of when she used to sing to me in the kitchen. That memory felt ancient now, distant, not mine anymore. Finally, he said, "It's been over a year. I didn't think we'd still be doing this." "Why not?" she asked sharp. "You're still married to her, aren't you? She still hasn't figured it out. That's practically a green light." He didn't answer. My heart thudded louder with each passing second. I could feel the blood pulsing behind my ears, as if my body was trying to drown out the next thing I was about to hear. Then my mother's voice dropped, dripping with venom disguised as charm. "You know what really bothers me?" James exhaled. "What?" "That she still gets to walk into a room on your arm. That she still gets your name. That she gets the illusion while I'm the one stuck hiding behind curtains and phone calls." A pause. Then she added so quietly I almost missed it. "I gave up everything for this. Everything. For this?" My stomach turned. The bile rose up behind my throat, hot and bitter. She made it sound like she was the victim. Like I had stolen something from her. James's voice came again, tentative this time. "I never asked you to give up anything. We said this would be temporary, just us figuring things out. So figure it out," she snapped. "Either leave her or stop calling me every time you feel guilty." Guilty. That word hovered in the air. But not for them, for me, because I still loved him. Even now, with every syllable confirming my worst fear, some pathetic part of me still wanted it not to be true. Still wanted him to come home, kiss me on the cheek, and say it was all just a misunderstanding. And what terrified me more than anything, it's the tiny whisper inside me that said I probably would have forgiven him. I sat back on my heels, the mud beneath me soaking into my jeans. My hands were trembling. I pressed my palms to the cold, wet ground to steady myself. I needed to breathe. I needed to move. I needed my mother laughed again, sharp and triumphant. She's always been slow to see what's right in front of her, same as when she thought her father was faithful. James groaned softly. "Don't bring that up. Oh, come on. The apple didn't fall far, did it? They were joking about it. My pain. my past. The very wounds I had once cried over in James's arms, he was now laughing about them with her Dot. Something inside me broke. Quietly, not with a scream or a sob, but with a silence so deep it rang through my bones. I wasn't the daughter anymore. I wasn't the wife. I was just ... gone. I stood up slowly, careful not to make a sound. The rain had slicked my hair to my face. My hands were muddy, my knees aching, but none of that mattered. All I could think about was the moment I'd first introduced them. How proud I was, how much. I believed that maybe, just maybe, my broken mother and my kind husband could find peace in each other's company. Maybe I could build a family from pieces. Maybe I could rewrite my story. But I hadn't rewritten anything. Bet I'd walked blindly into a tragedy that had been authored long before I knew it was even being written. I backed away from the window, step by step, until I reached the gate again. My fingertips grazed the cold iron as I slipped through it. I didn't cry on the drive home. I didn't scream. I didn't call a friend or tear through drawers looking for answers. I just walked into my apartment, peeled off my wet clothes, and stood under a hot shower for what felt like hours. I let the water burn my skin until it turned pink, until I couldn't tell where the cold ended and the heat began. That night, I lay in bed beside him like nothing had changed. His breathing was steady even. He didn't reach for me. He rarely did anymore. I stared at the ceiling in the dark, thinking of every moment that led us here. Every choice I made that handed him pieces of my trust, till there was nothing left to give. He turned in his sleep and whispered my name. Not hers, mine. But I didn't feel special. I felt erased. The hardest part was pretending I didn't know. When I woke up the next morning, James was already dressed. He stood in front of the mirror adjusting his collar like it was any other Tuesday. He smiled when he saw me awake. "You were out cold last night," he said casually. "I didn't want to wake you." I nodded, lips pressed together, eyes still blurry from the night before. I knew if I spoke too soon, my voice would crack. I wasn't ready to lie with my mouth, so I let my silence carry the weight instead. He leaned down to kiss my forehead like always. I turned slightly, just enough to make it land on my cheek instead. He didn't say anything, but he noticed. I watched him walk out the door, briefcase in hand, keys jingling like a soundtrack to betrayal. The door shut behind him with a soft click, and I lay still, staring at the ceiling. My body felt heavy, like I was sinking through the mattress. But inside me, something had begun to shift. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't tell a soul. Instead, I opened a notebook. A plain black-covered one from the bottom drawer of my desk. I wrote the date at the top of the page in small, steady letters, March 4th, 6:32 a.m., left for work. Wearing blue shirt, didn't shower. Coffee cup, left half full. Kissed cheek instead of forehead. That was the first entry. I started keeping track of everything, every tiny detail. I downloaded a GPS tracker app while he was asleep and paired it with his car's Bluetooth. I made it look like I was being affectionate, just trying to fix the sync issue, I said. He barely looked up from his phone. His patterns became obvious within days. He wasn't clever, just confident. Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, client meetings that always landed him at the same residential address between 8:15 and 10:30 a.m. I didn't have to knock on the door again. I knew who lived there. I knew what they were doing. I wasn't documenting for proof anymore. I was documenting for control. When we had dinner, I'd listen to him lie with ease. I'd nod when he said, "Work's been rough," or "Your mom texted me today, she's been feeling lonely." Lonely, right? He had no idea I had screenshots of that exact message, but sent from her phone to him at 3:19 p.m. right after he'd left her house. No punctuation, just 3 words. She still doesn't. I copied it into the notebook. There was something cold, almost clinical about it. Each entry felt like a brick I was laying, building the foundation of something I wasn't ready to name. But I knew this. I wouldn't be blindsided again. I would never be caught weeping outside a window. If they wanted war, they'd get it. But it would be on my terms. I stopped wearing makeup. He didn't comment. I stopped reaching for his hand when we crossed the street. He didn't offer his either. I stopped initiating anything physical, and he didn't seem to notice. He had already left me. He just didn't know I was finally leaving him. Too, not physically. Not yet. I needed more time, more certainty, more silence. Silence, I realized, was more powerful than rage. Rage could be dismissed. Screaming could be laughed at. But silence made people squirm. It made them wonder what you knew. It made them scared to ask. My mother, for once, was quieter too. She stopped calling. I assumed James told her I was acting strange, or maybe she'd sensed it herself. She had always been a master at reading people, just not at loving them. She tried once sent me a message about having tea together. Just us girls. I didn't reply. I marked it in the notebook and deleted the text. Each day I became a better actress. I smiled when I had to, laughed in the right places. I made sure the house looked lived in. I cooked exactly the kind of meals James liked and left passive clues in the kitchen, his favorite sauces stocked, new hand towels in his color. I wanted him to feel comfortable, safe. A man only lets his guard down when he thinks he's already won. One night, he came home later than usual, said the meeting had run long. His tie was missing and his shirt collar was wrinkled. I asked him if he wanted tea. He blinked, surprised, and said sure. When I handed it to him, I caught a faint trace of perfume, not mine, and not the lavender scent my mother always wore, but something newer, floral, younger. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was layers of betrayal. That's when I stopped trying to win him back. Even before that moment, part of me had held on to the hope that maybe he was confused. Maybe she'd manipulated him. Maybe he didn't know what he was doing. But standing there, watching him sip tea I made with hands he'd forgotten how to touch, I realized he knew exactly what he was doing. And that meant I knew exactly what I was going to do. I started backing up the notebooks, scanning every page, every note, every screenshot, and emailing it to a private cloud drive I created under a new name. I started recording audio during dinner conversations, especially when he talked about his day. A small voice recorder hidden in the fruit bowl captured it all. I wasn't just documenting anymore. I was preparing for the moment when silence wouldn't just be a weapon. It would be the trap. And they were already walking into it. The evening sun filtered through the curtains, casting a golden hue across the dining table. I had carefully set white tulips in a vase, candles scented just as she preferred. My husband's favorite wine chilled in a silver bucket beside the plates. Everything was precise. Warm, welcoming, even delicate. The kind of dinner that made people let their guard down. I could hear the front door creak open just as I finished adjusting the napkins. Footsteps, 2 sets. Laughter, my mother's voice. Light and high, like she'd already decided tonight would be perfect. My husband's chuckle followed, and I felt the sound of it stab into me like a slow, familiar knife. I met them at the doorway with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes, but neither of them noticed. He leaned in to kiss my cheek, and I let him. My mother handed me a small box wrapped in gold paper. "Happy early birthday," she chirped. "I figured you wouldn't want to fuss on the real day." I thanked her sweetly, placed the gift on the coffee table, and gestured toward the dining room. "Dinner's almost ready. Just wanted the 3 of us to have a quiet night. You know, like old times." They settled in easily, chatting like nothing in the world could go wrong. And for them, maybe it couldn't. Not yet. I ladled soup into bowls, poured wine, asked about my mom's new Pilates class. I even laughed when she complained about the instructor being too young and too perky. My husband was glowing, probably relieved. I hadn't asked where he'd been last weekend when he came home smelling like her perfume. He took seconds of everything, complimented the roast, told me I should open a restaurant. I nodded, smiled, refilled his glass dot once the plates were cleared and the mood had swelled into that soft, sentimental lull only family dinners can bring. I excused myself. "One last thing," I said, my voice bright. "I made something special." Their faces lit up, expecting dessert. "Maybe a cake?" I disappeared into the hallway and returned carrying a leather-bound album. The kind people usually fill with baby pictures or wedding memories. I placed it in the center of the table. My mother tilted her head. "What's this?" "Open it," I said gently, sliding into my seat. She flipped the cover. Her fingers froze on the first page. Screenshot her name at the top, followed by a string of late-night texts to my husband. My husband leaned in, frowning. Then the next page. Another screenshot, and the next. GPS logs, hotel receipts. A printed photo of them laughing together in a booth. I recognized because he once took me there for our anniversary. He blinked, still unsure if he was supposed to laugh or panic. My mother's face turned to stone. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. I thought it was time we put everything on the table. I said, calm as still water. My husband shot out of his chair. "You've been spying on me." I didn't flinch. "No, I've been watching. There's a difference." He turned toward my mother, eyes wide. "Why didn't you? Why would you even?" She didn't answer. Her hand hovered over the pages like they might burn her. "I documented everything," I continued. "Every whisper, every lie, every excuse. I spent weeks gathering it all while smiling at both of you. While you thought I was too stupid or too soft to know better." I stood up slowly, but I wasn't. Before they could respond, I walked to the corner of the room where a Bluetooth speaker sat quietly on a shelf. I pressed play. His voice filled the space first. "You know she'll never leave me. She's too scared to be alone." Then hers. "She doesn't even suspect anything. I'm her mother. She trusts me." The room went quiet. The silence that followed was not just awkward. It was dense, heavy, like the air had thickened between us. I didn't look at them as I turned and walked into the kitchen, letting the call play out behind me. I didn't need to see their faces. I'd imagined them already, over and over, in 100 sleepless nights. The shame, the fear, the guilt they'd thought they could outrun when I came back. My husband was sitting with his head in his hands, the audio still echoing faintly from the speaker. My mother stared at the album like it might start bleeding. I picked up the wine bottle and poured myself a glass. "Happy birthday to me," I whispered, and took a sip. Neither of them spoke, and I didn't need them to. That was the gift, their silence. The knock on the bathroom door came soft and frantic. Then her mother's voice trying to soothe like honey over broken glass. "Sweetheart, you didn't have to do all that in front of him." She stared at her reflection, hands pressed to the cold sink. Her face was calm, but her eyes were rimmed with betrayal. Behind the door, the lies were still crawling. "I did it in front of both of you because that's exactly where it needed to happen," she said quietly. Not even sure if her voice would carry. Her husband's voice came next, desperate. "It wasn't like that. It got confusing. I didn't know how to stop it." She opened the door. They both flinched at the look in her eyes. "Stop pretending this was some mistake. If you had a choice, so did you, Mom, and you both made it. Every single day." Her mother reached for her, the same hand that used to braid her hair, press fevered towels to her forehead. "I never meant to hurt you. I was lonely, and he was there." A small, bitter smile flickered across her lips. "You were supposed to be there for me." They tried again, overlapping apologies, promises to talk it through to make it right. But she'd already stopped listening. She picked up her coat, slung her purse over her shoulder, and walked straight out the front door, leaving them in. The house she had decorated with candles, roses, and a dinner they'd never touched outside. The cold air hit her like truth. Sharp, real. It's been 11 months. The silence in her apartment now isn't hollow. It's peaceful. There are plants. She keeps alive herself. Sun-faded couch she bought with her own money. A kitchen where she sings while she cooks, barefoot. Because no one's watching, she has Sunday dinners with people who call her family but share no blood. Her neighbor, Ms. Kamala, who brings over too much lasagna. Her co-worker Ray, who taught her to fix her leaky faucet without calling a man. Even Luna, the barista who remembers her order and her bad days, counts. They built her back with kindness, piece by piece. And when the ache comes, because it still does, in sudden flashes, she doesn't shove it down. She lets it rise, then lets it pass. Healing, she's learned, isn't a straight line. It's a quiet rebellion. Today she drives a long way home, windows down, hair loose, a new playlist humming low. She turns the corner and sees it her mother's house. Same faded shutters. Same cracked walkway. She slows down, heart steady, no anger. It's no longing, just memory. Then she presses the gas and keeps going. She doesn't look back.